Imine Trente Shetin El Legislature Guahan is called to order. For the prayer, will Senator Blas kindly lead us? Please rise.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, as we move through the year, and as we had gone past the anniversary of what was probably the most prolific storm that our island experienced in over 2 decades, we want to thank you for continuing to bless and watch over us. Continue to watch over us as we now embark on debating bills on the floor that are meant to be able to make our island safer, make our island stronger, make our island prouder. Give us the wisdom and the strength and the fortitude to be able to get past the differences and look for the compromises. Give us the fortitude and give us the ability to be able to work together. Put partisanship aside for the sake of doing what's right for our people, for your people. We ask this in Jesus' name, and we ask in the Lord's Prayer, we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Jesus Masi, Senator Blas, for the recognition to express a never-ending and never-forgotten gratitude by the people of Guam, the legislature recognizes recipients of Finalizing na Sacrificio on a display in the Guam Congress building and during each of its sessions. For the recognition of a recipient of Finalizing na Sacrificio, Senator Paris, you are recognized.
On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Specialist 5th Class Edward Regis Diaz and the family of the Specialist 5th Class Edward Regis Diaz for making the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our island and country.
Situs Masi, for the reciting of the Interfresi, will the Vice Speaker kindly lead us?
Situs Masi, Speaker, Interfresi, Gini Mustakilu, Gihina Soko, Imustakulum, Gikorasonhu, Zani Musfigu, Nanisanahu, Hua Fressen Maisatu, Baraprotehi, Zanu Defendi, I Nengi, I Katura, I Lenguai, I Aidi, I Hanam, Zanitano Samoro, Nariran Shaku, Diretsu, Ginanasdu Stata, Esti, Hua Fitma, Gihilu, I Biblia, Zani Banderahu, I Bandera Guahan.
For the singing of the Guam hymn and the national anthem, we call on Vanessa Santos-Binky. we're having audio issues, so we're going to take a 5-minute break, a 5-minute recess. We're back from recess. Colleagues, thank you for your patience. We've completed this morning up to the singing of the national anthem, and then we had technical difficulties, so we've been in recess since then. Hopefully these are resolved now. So we will proceed with roll call. Clerk, please take the roll call.
Senator Barnett. Senator Blas. Senator Brown. Senator Dueñas. Senator Fisher. Senator Lujan. Vice Speaker Munya Barnes. Senator Parkinson. Senator Perez. Senator Canetta. Senator San Augustine. Senator Siniclis. Senator Shelton. Senator Titlery. Speaker Talahi. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Sijus Masi, clerks. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. I move to approve the Legislative Journal dated April 19, 2024, subject to corrections.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. There are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On that motion to append communications and petitions, any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. On messages, Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. There are messages from Imega Hagan Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On that motion to append messages from Imega Hagan Guahan, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Reports, Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. There are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On that motion to append reports of standing committees, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are no reports of select committees.
Sidus Masi, please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I move that bills introduced, bill numbers 276-37LS through 292-37LS and 293-37COR through 312-37COR, and resolutions introduced, numbers 379-37LS through 393-37LS and 394-37COR through 419-37COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On that motion regarding the first reading and introduction of bills and resolution, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now under motions. Majority Leader, you're recognized under motions.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. I move to excuse senators who are not present for today's legislative session.
On that motion to excuse senators, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still under motions. Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of this legislative session be considered first read and adopted to allow the Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
On that motion regarding resolutions, commendatory and congratulatory resolutions, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still under motions. Are there any other motions? Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Seduce Masi, Madam Speaker. I move that all bills dealing with an appropriation be moved to the bottom of the file to be dealt with in the Committee of the Whole in numerical order. That'll be Bill 277-37, Bill 285-37.
All right, Majority Leader, yes, the appropriation bills are already set after bills 1, 2, 3, I mean the 6.
They're in the middle.
6 bills on the agenda. So beginning with the 7th bill, those are the appropriation bills. And after, this was done by the Committee on Rules, and after the appropriation bills are additional bills pending if we have time. So I think it's already been done.
So they're going to be the last bills then?
They're going to be after 6 bills before the second round of bills.
Madam
Vice
Speaker.
Speaker, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a clarification, because if you're talking about the 6 bills on the agenda, there's a resolution by Senator San Nicolas and then a bill by Senator Taitigui, which is the 7th bill, which is not an appropriation. So I just want to make sure.
It is an appropriation. Yeah, so the 7th bill, 8th, 9th, those are all the appropriations. During the Committee on Rules, they were set in this order after the first round of bills. So that was already done.
Thank you.
Jesus Masi, are there any other motions? Senator Dueñas, you're recognized. Oh, sorry, Majority Leader, forgive me, Senator Dueñas.
Thank you
Majority
very
Leader, you're
much,
recognized.
Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill number 109-37 to the bottom of the file.
There's a motion to place bill number 109 to the bottom of the agenda. Bottom of the agenda. Is there any objection, Senator?
I'm sorry,
Tai-
Madam Speaker, if you can put it to after number 5.
There's a motion to reorder the agenda and place bill number 109 after bill number 240 on the agenda. Is there any objection?
It already is. Okay. And Madam Speaker, if we could also reorder.
Well, on that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. If we could also reorder Bill number 274 to place it at the top of the Committee of the Whole appropriations bills.
All right, so 274, the motion is to reorder the agenda to move 274 before Bill 268, which is our first appropriations bill. Is there any objection to that motion? Senator Taitigui.
Actually, just 1 minute, because, you know, if there's good reason for this, that this bill would go before my bill, then I really want to know. So if you give me 1 minute.
We're back from recess. There was a motion to reorder the agenda to move Bill 274 before 268.
Madam Speaker, I move to withdraw that motion.
That motion is withdrawn. All right. So we're... All right. Is there any objection to withdrawing the motion? Seeing no objection, motion is withdrawn. All right, we're back on motions. Senator Dueñas, you're recognized under motions.
Jesus Masi, Madam Chairman. And at this point in time, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to place Bill 175-37 as substituted by the author and provided to the committee. It was introduced by Christopher M. Dueñas, myself, Frank Blas Jr., Jesse Lujan, Thomas J. Fisher, Dwayne T.D. St. Nicholas, and it's an act to amend 48101C and add new 48101F and also G, and amend 48104A, 48104B, 3, 48104, and amend and renumber 48106 and 48112-.1, and add 48126A, add a new, and 48125, 48126, 48127, 48128, and 48129, all of Chapter 48, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to include nitrogen-reducing systems, establish administrative process, and create the Sewage Disposal Assistance Fund. I make that motion at this time.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. As you know, that motion is out of order according to our rules, which state no bill shall be placed on the session agenda unless accompanied by a committee report conforming to the requirements of these rules, or unless the public hearing on the bill has been waived in accordance with 2 GCA 2103 by the Speaker during session pursuant to motion made during the motions part of the session agenda. Except as specifically allowed, no bill may be placed on the floor without a majority of the committee members of the committee to which it was referred voting to pass or to report out only. There's also another rule that says it is out of order to refer and debate to a bill or other matter not yet reported by a committee. Neither is it in order to refer to proceedings of a committee unless the committee has formally reported its proceedings to the legislature in Guam.
Madam Chair, at this time, I move to override the chair based on a notwithstanding motion, which has been used in all of our legislative sessions prior. You know that. So at this time, I move to overrule the chair.
There's a motion to overrule the chair's ruling that the motion's out of order. On that, all who wish to overrule the chair, please raise your hand.
Madam Speaker, on a point of information, please. On a point of information, Madam Chair. On the point of information, the good senator said notwithstanding already, so there's no need to overrule the presider because he already did a notwithstanding motion. We vote on the motion notwithstanding. All right, well, the ruling of the chair has been made. That is appeal. There's an appeal. I'm asking for a vote unless there is, which is not debatable. So all in favor of overruling the chair, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion fails. Still under motions. Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding any House rules, I move to place Bill number 39-37 COR to the bottom of the session agenda. Sponsored by myself, William A. Parkinson, an act to amend subsection D of 7.112 and to add a new subsection E to 7.113, both of Article 5, Chapter 7, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to better effectuating the intent of Guam's Castle Doctrine by eliminating the duty to retreat from the curtilage of one's residence, and to enhancing judicial economy by adopting a pretrial hearing to determine a defendant's immunity from criminal prosecution, and to cite this act as the Castle Doctrine Reform Act of 2023.
Jesus Masi, Senator. Again, as you know, that motion is out of order for the same rule that no bill shall be placed on the session agenda unless accompanied by a committee report conforming to the requirements of these rules. No bill may be placed on the floor without a majority of the committee members of the committee to which it was referred voting to pass or to report out only. That is the ruling.
Notwithstanding the House rules, I'd like to override the ruling of the
There's
chair.
a motion to overrule the chair. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. We're still under motions. Are there any other motions? Senator Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you, ma'am. This is actually a point of inquiry.
Please state your point of view.
In light of the chair's rulings on the last two issues this morning, does the chair agree that every time in the past the 37th Guam Legislature has moved a bill forward and passed that bill, despite the fact that there was no committee report, does the chair agree that all of those bills are now null and void?
There have been no bills passed without the committee reports, except for those that have been deemed emergency, and the public hearing has been waived by the presiding officer. Are there any other motions? If not, we'll proceed with the second reading. We're now on, no, I'm sorry, legislative concurrence. Majority Leader, you recognize under legislative concurrence.
Situus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Services, Self-Determination and Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Accountability, and the Guam Buildup, the nomination of Rina K. Borja to serve as a member, General Public Representative of the Guam Contractors License Board, with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place a nomination of Rina K. Borja to the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
And Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Maritime Transportation, Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens, the nomination of Michael A. Scrow to serve as a member of the Guam Visitors Bureau Board of Directors, with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place in the voting file the nomination of Michael A. Scrow, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right, now we will begin the second reading file, which we have moved Bill 109, so we begin now with Bill number 153-37 LS. Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move Bill 153-37 LS as introduced by myself, Frank F. Bloss Jr., Thomas J. Fisher, and Dwayne T.D. Siniclas, which is an act to add a new subsection 80.37b to Article 2, Chapter 80, Title 9, Guam Code annotated relative to the possession or the use of an explosive or an improvised explosive device in the commission of a felony into the third reading, and I'd like the opportunity to speak on it, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 153-37 LS was introduced as a result of discussions that we were having on a previous, on another bill with regard to not so much an explosive, an incendiary device. And it caused me to look into our statutes with regards to the utilizations of explosive or improvised explosive devices when it's used in the commission of a felony. And much to my surprise is that while we recognize and we utilize, we see that there are basically enhanced criminal penalties, punishments for the utilization of firearms and the utilization of baseball bats and knives, there was really no legislation that produced or that identified or addressed the use of an explosive or an IED. And while there does exist federal statute to that effect, it was kind of, for me, and I tell you what, much to my embarrassment and dismay, I went through a whole law enforcement career, and I've probably had to be, numerous times confronted with an explosive device or an IED. Now, while not personally ever been involved in an explosion like that, if anyone can recall, at one point in time, there was a grenade that was actually launched, that was detonated at the northern precinct in Dedido. And even at that, while that was covered by a federal statute, there was no local, obviously there is no local statute that does cover this. So what this bill intends to provide to do is to make it basically a felony if you are to possess and or use an explosive or an improvised explosive device as defined in the commission of a felony, and that once convicted, the punishment for that is an addition to the punishment of the crime of the actual other felony that was committed in the commission of the felony, for imprisonment of not more than of at least 10 years, but not more than 25 years. So basically, it covers a loophole, something that we would hope that we would never have to use. But now, if it does occur, there is now that protection that's added, or there is that penalty that's added to our statute. So with that, Madam Speaker, I ask my colleagues for their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Blas. On the motion by Senator Blas to place Bill 153 to the third reading, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized? Senator Kanata, you're recognized.
I definitely rise in support of my colleague. I certainly believe that this legislation is a very proactive approach, and I think he got this proactive approach because he used to be Director at Homeland Security. So I just wanted to commend the author, and I wish him well on this legislation and look forward to its passage. And I'd also like to ask to be a co-sponsor. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Kanata. On the bill, anyone else who would like to be recognized, Bill 153? Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Morning, Madam Speaker. Morning, colleagues. This bill is very, I think it's really important. I visited one of those places that sells cop gear, and you could see the evolution of a cop uniform through the decades, through the centuries, And we've come to a point where our police folks are wearing body armor equivalent to the Kevlar that I wore when I was deployed in the military. And I know we all speak about our experiences. And, I've actually experienced an IED, and I could see, how these things work. And I think me and my battle buddies were happy that the bad guy actually forgot to put some shrapnel in that IED. It was a big explosion, and there was one. It opened up the road, and it was about a hole about maybe 5 foot deep. And we went out to investigate it. It's funny what happens in deployment, all these kind of things. But I know the effect of improvised explosive device. It's I think the author, because of how things are been progressing with crime, and I think it's important that we we put something like this in law, because as time progresses, you know, people get creative with things, and I think this is a good measure that help prevent unfortunate things like this from happening. And so I applaud the author for introducing the measure, and I ask my colleagues for support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator St. Nicholas. On the motion to place the bill, Senator Perez, you're recognized.
I support this bill. I think it's a good bill that we increase penalties when in the use of explosive devices in commission of a crime. I just have a question regarding legal's review. Were they able to review it? And I just want to make sure this bill is airtight in regards to the definition. So if there's a way to have legal take a look at this.
Did you want to pose your question?
Yeah, so I guess the question that I have is, the bill does provide a definition for improvised explosive devices, and I just want to make sure this definition has been utilized before, and if there's any, gaps in the definition, so we just want to make sure that it covers any gaps. So perhaps also this could be a question to the author of the bill.
Would the sponsor yield?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, yes, it has passed legal muster and review. The definition as provided in the statute, in this bill, is a definition to be consistent, is a definition as defined in federal statute, in federal code. And so, with regard to the legal review, it has passed that muster already. Thank you very much.
Jesus Masi. Senator Parrish, you have the floor.
Thank you for that response. I appreciate it.
All right. On the motion to place Bill 153 to the third reading, any other senator would like to be recognized? Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. Apologize for the frog in my throat right now. Got it over the weekend. I stand, of course, in full support. I think this legislation is needed. We're seeing more of improvised type of devices that are being used for explosive purposes to harm people. And I was hoping that maybe even in the legislation that there might be even harsher punishments if any of these explosives went off in school areas. That might be a consideration. The other one is I do believe, the good senator from Barragata Heights, when she was talking about the definition, and then I did look at the title of the bill, using improvised explosive devices. And my concern too is, what if it's not improvised? What if it's just an explosive device? So I wanted to ensure that that also was covered in the legislation. It is covered in the title, but it's not covered in the body. And I was hoping that when asked from legal, if we can get that, it is in the title, but it's not, I don't see it in what section? Or what line?
16.
Page 1, line 16? Okay. Okay, so it's, okay, got it, right, thank you so much. It's important that we cover, cross our T's and dot our I's with something so important as this legislation. Hope it would deter people from, buying a bunch of fireworks and putting it together and blowing it up. Maybe now that we're gonna put this bill together, harsher penalties is needed, because doggone knows we don't have rules and regulations for things like that. And anybody can put, and if I'm not mistaken, it was just recently that somebody was convicted for putting these explosives together, small ones in fact. So anything like this to deter and to keep our public safe, of course, I'm total support of it. And I do, maybe another legislation or another bill that we increase that penalty if it's near schools. Finding more and more of parents afraid to put their kids at schools with shootings going on, and now with just explosive devices, putting in lockers. We have to address that, and we have to address it soon. What are we going to do for minors if they're caught? Are they being tried as an adult for something like this? So this is just the beginning, and I thank the good author of the legislation for beginning to go down that path to keep our place a better and safer place to live. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Taitakui. On the motion to place bill, Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this bill and thank the author, Senator Frank Blas. Definitely his background in law enforcement is a benefit to us and to the island with regards to the introduction of this bill, and I'm sure the passage of this bill. You know, it's unfortunate as time goes on here that we're seeing continued threats in our community from all shapes and all forms. I mean, just not too long ago, we had an incident down in Tamuning at the ITC building where, you know, the people that were there had to be evacuated. I mean, we hear this all the time. It sometimes happens at the court. It happens in other areas around the island. And, you know, we want to ensure the safety of our community and our people. Really, at the end of the day, that's what's most important. And we also want to send out the message. You know, some people say, well, you can't be too harsh because if you're too harsh, you know, it's not going to deter people and they're going to go ahead and do what they're going to do anyway. And I just think there's some things in our community we just need to put our foot down and say, hey, enough is enough. If you commit these type of crimes, you're going to do the time. And it's going to be a serious offense. It's nothing that we're going to treat as a community lightly, especially where you're trying in any way to harm someone else, to harm innocent people in this community. And so I certainly support this legislation, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure it'll pass. I think that message needs to be sent out as clearly as we possibly can. And, you know, I'm dumbfounded. I mean, anybody who comes up with things like this to harm people, innocent people in our community are going about their lives and going about their day and just trying to do the best they can. And yet there's so much fear now in our community because we have lawlessness and individuals that think they can go ahead and do what they want to do and harm others. And I think we just need to say enough is enough. So I certainly support this bill and thank Senator Blas for introducing it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Senator Brown. Is there anyone else? Senator Lujan, you're recognized on Bill 153.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and morning, colleagues. I, too, stand in full support of this bill, Madam Speaker. You know, it's expansive legislation, and the sad reality that we face nowadays, but, you know, we need to address that, as sad as it may be. This is the sign of our times. And I want to thank the author for such legislation. And because if and when it should happen, and we hope and pray that it doesn't, that there's legislation that will address such actions that will be taken by individuals with ill intent. Again, it's a sad reality, but it's the reality that we face nowadays. And I stand in full support, and I ask the rest of my colleagues to be in support of this legislation. Thank you again, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Senator Blas, for the introduction of this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. On the motion to place Bill 153 in the third reading, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleagues for their basically contribution and for their questions. You know, you're right. You have to cross our T's and dot our I's. And I've always been a believer that, you know, no question, nothing should be left unturned. And if there is some doubt and there's some concern as to whether or not this fully covers it, well, let's have that conversation here. I would rather have that conversation here and now than later on when we find that we did not address it. And I appreciate that. You know, but Madam Speaker, before I close and motion to move it down to third, I'd like to make another motion to add, include Senators Roy Kenyatta, Jesse Lujan, Sabina Perez, Telo Taitigui, Joanne Brown, Chris Barnett, my sister, Tina Rosemary Barnes, and then everybody else, Madam Speaker, yourself, and everybody else actually, all other colleagues, and to the as co-sponsors to this legislation. Roy?
All right, on that motion to add sponsors, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With that, thank you, my colleagues again, and I'd like wish to move the bill to the third reading file.
On the motion to place the bill in third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now proceeding in second reading. We are on bill number 183-37 COR. Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I motion to place the bill 183-37 COR into the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank my co-sponsors on this measure, who include Senator Lujan, Senator Duenas, Senator Brown, Senator Taitigui, Senator San Nicolas, Senator San Augustine, Senator Perez, Senator Shelton, Senator Kanata, Senator Fisher, as well as Senator Parkinson. And the bill's an act to amend subsection 25.15b and 2520b to Chapter 25 of Title IX Guam Code annotated relative to enacting higher minimum sentencing requirements for individuals convicted of first and second degree criminal sexual conduct involving victims under 12 years of age. And what the bill does is implement components of Jessica's Law on Guam. Jessica's Law is the informal name given to a 2005 Florida law, as well as laws in several other states designed to protect potential victims and reduce sexual offenders' ability to reoffend, which includes a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years in prison and lifetime electronic monitoring when the victim is less than 12 years old. A version of Jessica's Law was introduced at the federal level, however, never passed. But this bill, Madam Speaker, has been implemented in 46 different states. And, you know, and just doing some of the prep work for this bill, I mean, we have a major problem on Guam with criminal sexual conduct and pedophiles, predators who target our children. Just going over some of the headlines, convicted rapist allegedly tells investigators he's addicted to sexually assaulting girls. There was another very disturbing, they're all disturbing stories, 4 charged in the rape of 3 girls. Girl 14 accuses suspect of rape, multiple sexual assaults since she was 11. Man 64 faces life in prison for sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl. Victim's mother testifies in sexual assault trial. Teen accused of touching 2 girls ages 6 and 7. Man 57 given 25-year sentence for raping 3 girls over a 9-year span. Convicted molester arrested, charged in new rape case. And so very bad people on this island want to do very bad things to our kids. And sadly, our punishments for criminal sexual conduct for victims under 12 and I feel are sorely in need of updating, and that's what this bill does. Is this bill currently the penalty for first-degree criminal sexual conduct for victim under 12 is 15 to life, and this bill raises it to a mandatory 25 years. Currently, the penalty for second-degree criminal sexual conduct is 5 to 10 years plus a 5-year vulnerable victim, and that. Basically, the bill raises both of these penalties by 10 years. And again, with 47 other states following suit, ma'am, and given the terrible tragedies and the prevalence really of these pedophiles and these predators I think it's long overdue that we increase the penalties for those who would choose to harm our children. And especially with the incidents of recidivism with these pedophiles and these predators, I think really one of the only ways we can keep our kids safe is to keep these sick individuals locked up for a very, very long time. And so I ask my colleagues' support for this measure. And, you know, unfortunately, I agreed with the Attorney General's testimony at the public hearing for this bill. He said, hey, we should put these sick individuals in prison for life. And I agree. And this bill raises the floor and allows the judges to do just that. But I think for these types of crimes committed against our children, people deserve these penalties and much more. They say, let the punishment fit the crime. And I introduced this bill and I asked for its support and its passage, but I mean, really the tragedy and the horror that these kids endure when they're victimized by these sick individuals, I mean, to me, letting the punishment fit the crime would be killing these sick individuals over and over again. But unfortunately, we all know that a measure that tried to do that wouldn't even get out of committee and wouldn't even hit the floor in this body. So I ask that we come together and pass this long overdue bill and join me in protecting our children. Protehi I famagoonta. Si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker.
Si Diyos masi, Senator Burnett. On the motion to place Bill 184 onto the third reading, is there any senator who would like to be recognized? Sorry, Bill 183-37 onto the third reading. Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I would rise definitely in support of this measure, and I agree with the sponsor. If there was more we could do, if there was a higher consequence, I'd support that. You know, it is disturbing on our island. You know, you look outside and it's such a beautiful sunny day, and you wonder how could such horrific things happen? How could anyone want to harm innocent children? Children who are unable to understand in some cases and most definitely have no ability themselves to protect themselves. To do something so harmful. You know, and how do you profile these individuals? How do you recognize who they are when they walk among us? How do you address it when they're relatives? This is definitely a message we need to send out, not just the previous bill by Senator Blas, but more so even this bill. You know, I remember the news story when there was this young girl who was 12 years old. She was waiting at the bus stop for her bus to go to school. And she ends up being molested and harmed by a sexual predator that had been released from prison. Can you imagine that? An innocent child who's simply waiting at the bus stop to go to school, doing what they're supposed to be doing. And yet there are grown adults in this community, and yeah, I don't know any other word to describe it other than sick, that would dare bring harm to them. These are our children, my dear people. And sad to say, it's our own people that are bringing this harm to them. You know, it's something that should be discussed more often. And definitely, gosh, if you could line them up, if there was more harm we could bring to these offenders, gosh, if there's anything I would be as a mother, I'd do it myself. We see it every single week practically. We hear it in the news. These offenses that continue to occur out there. And I don't know if anyone fears, you know, being in prison, thinking, oh gosh, if I do this, I'm going to get another 10, 20 years. Wow. Or are they just, their mind is just in a place that I don't ever want to see go? It's just not okay. Because these children, in some cases, are damaged a lifetime. Their sense of who they are, of their ownership of themselves and of their mind and of their body, is affected by that. Because why should these children who are supposed to be cared for, are supposed to be safe in our community, being raped and brutalized? And being treated less than trash? We should all be up in arms about this. And certainly, I agree, if we could do more to these individuals, if we could execute them, I'd do it. Because it just isn't right. And it happens every day in this community to our children. I noticed in the bill there's separate standards that if you're under 12, it's longer, and if you're older than 12, the sentence is not as long. And I just wanted to ask the sponsor the reason for that. Because, 12 years old is still 12 years old, 13 years old, still 13 years old. These are still children. So if I could ask the sponsor to yield to that question as to why there's the delineation in the age, or should we simply make it consistent under the age of 13 and under? But I wanted to find out if the sponsor would yield to that question, Madam Speaker.
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
Could I just have a short recess real quick?
1 minute recess.
Thank you.
We're back from recess. I believe Senator Brown had posed a question to the sponsor. Would the sponsor yield?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and yes, I would. The standard that is put forth in Bill 183-37 is the standard based on Jessica's law, and that's why it is for victims 12 and under, and this is a standard that is held. It's tried and true. It hasn't been struck down in 46 states, so I felt given the prevalence of these crimes, it's unfortunate crimes by these evil individuals, this was just a good place to raise the floor at. And so thank you, Madam Speaker, and I hope that satisfies the Senator's question.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the explanation that's been provided by the sponsor, Senator Chris Barnett. And I rise in support of this bill. Again, I just feel very much that message needs to be sent out. We have to uplift our children. I mean, we always talk about them being the future, and we need to have them have a good foundation, a good sense of worth and who they are, in what they have ahead to do. And we as adults have a greater responsibility to ensure that they're safe, even if they have to be safe against other adults in this community that want to harm them. And if this is what it takes, and I'll tell you, if there's more, I'd be more than happy to support it, because this to me is the highest offense. To harm someone who is helpless. That's got to be one of the worst things anyone can do. For every mother out there, for every father out there, for every grandparent out there that looks at their children, their pride, their joy, all that they are, all that is ahead for them. We just can't see this as just another week on Guam that this sort of thing is acceptable, and then let them back out on the street to offend again. Because they keep telling us this is not something curable. It's not something you can take a drug. It's not even something you can get stoned on. Since, we want to preoccupy our time with those type of nonsense things, but we need to protect our children, and we need to make it very clear that if you go down this road, if you harm a child in this community, you're convicted. You're going to go away for a long time. Maybe your lifetime. And if that's what it takes, then so be it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunities to ask the question and certainly rise in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Senator Blas and then Senator Teichgui. Oh, I'm so sorry. I had recognized the Vice Speaker earlier. My apologies, Vice Speaker Munya Barnes. And then Senator Blas and Senator Teichgui.
I promise, Madam Speaker, I'll make it short. I do, too, just want to stand and rise in support of this measure. And I don't know why my name's not here, but I think it's important as this proposed legislation is looking at establishing the minimum incarceration penalties of 25 years for those who are convicted of first-degree criminal sexual conduct, and I guess 10 years for those convicted of second degree. I do want to note that in statute today, as we look at the statute, I know that statutory rape is at 15 years old and younger. And as we look at this, emulation of Jessica's laws and seeing what the author of this legislation talked about, that it's been tried and true in all the other, in 47 states or jurisdictions, I want to say it's important that we too can emulate and show the strength. I don't know, Madam Speaker, every time you open the paper and see there's somebody's arrested for criminal sexual conduct, we literally need to step in front of this and show that there is no room. There is no room for this kind of terrible crime. And I just want to say I support the efforts and thank the good author for bringing it up to the forefront. And as I look at the membership, the authors and the co-authors of this resolution, it's more than 75 I think the only two that are missing are me and you, but I think it's important that this measure get out there, and I really hope that the governor supports this effort because it is sending a strong message that we will not tolerate this kind of crime of criminal sexual conduct, especially to our children. Sana Masi. And I support this effort. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Jesus Masi, Vice Speaker. Senator Blas, Minority Leader, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's pretty obvious. It's difficult not to rise in support of this bill, and I do. I just wanted to make sure that it is congruent and it rises to passes the legal muster and the concern that any concerns that may be brought up. First off, let me go ahead and, with regard to the structure of the bill, on page 3, starting line 18, it says criminal sexual conduct in second degree is a felony in the first degree, comma. And then it strikes out, but a person convicted of criminal sexual conduct in the second degree who receives a sentence of imprisonment shall not be eligible for work release or educational programs. But then, when you go to page 4, line 3, what you struck out in page 2, or in page 3, you reiterated, you stated again in page 4. So, it's kind of confusing because while you strike it out there and then you leave it an open-ended, an open sentence, you put it back in later on in the section. So I think for the purposes of cleaning this and making sure that there's no ambiguity in the purpose of this, I agree that no work release or educational programs outside the fence should be permitted. But in the construct of the bill, we take it out, then we put it back in. And then the place where we take it out, we leave it open. Can I have just a 30 seconds so that I can work with my colleague, the author, and
1
maybe...
minute recess.
Okay.
Recess. Senator Blas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the ability to speak to the author. Just to be able to clean this up, proposal amendment, page 3, line 19, after first degree, put period there.
Is there any objection to entertaining this motion without it being in writing? If not, we'll proceed. On the amendment, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Amendment passes. Please proceed, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, Madam Speaker, I agree with the intent, okay? And I'm sure that the author himself, as well as the previous speaker, had spoken that the punishment is probably not harsh enough. Okay, but we don't want to go through, as much as people may characterize it as draconian, we're talking about an innocent, and we're talking about a defenseless child. Okay, and to stay within the confines of the law, we'll do so. And not to be a spoiler in the good intent of the legislation, there may have been a gap, and I could be wrong. I am just concerned that the statute as written basically sets the floor at 14 years of age as opposed to 12. And while the bill addresses those offenses that occur for individuals below the age of 12, everything else in our statutes set that minimum of 14. This may not affect it. I hope it doesn't. I agree. 12. I just want to make sure that we don't create a legal gap between what is defined in statute as everywhere else in our statute is 14 years of age, and this one says 12. What be it if the victim was a 13-year-old? Okay? While here it says it's going to be treated otherwise, there's conflict in the other parts of the statute that says it's 14 and above. But that being said, it may be cause for another piece of legislation, not to affect this one, because this one does impose the stricter penalties below the age of 12. I just don't want now to cause a gap because the rest of our laws say 14. In fact, in the second-degree felony or second-degree rape, there's a provision there about 14 to 16. What of that provision now? And as an officer of the court, I'm sure that he's probably going to raise some concern on that gap. Not with this. This one is clear. Below the age of 12, okay, it's a harsher penalty. So, along those lines, I stand in support of this measure. I think that there needs to be more done now that if this measure were to pass, in being able to ensure that there is no gap. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. I think it might help this body to realize the true meaning behind this legislation, where it came from, and who it was named after. Jessica's Law. In 2005, Jessica Lansford, a 9-year-old girl, was kidnapped, raped, and murdered in 2005 by an already convicted sex predator. That name, Jessica, could be any name on this island. Any name with the countless victims that have gone through such an atrocity. Ariane. It could be the Ariane legislation or law act. Ariane was one of our own who was raped. And after how many years of that, when her predator was going to be released, she had the guts, she had the strength to come up to the parole hearing to ensure that this individual was not released. Unfortunately, he was, but only to be convicted of another crime against a young girl. This could be anyone's name, any of our children's name. Sharon, Mary, Alice, Christine. This is a very, very sad story. 30 states have implemented this Jessica's Act. 30 states. And of those 30 states, they all implemented 25 years. They all included a minimum of 25 years mandatory prison sentence and lifetime monitoring after. I'd like to thank the author of this legislation, who always is ready to stand and fight for those less fortunate, those who are vulnerable. He's a father himself. So this is very meaningful for anyone who's a father of a daughter. Keeping our island safe, that's what's important. So I thank the author for allowing me to be a co-sponsor on this legislation, and to remind everyone that this bill, even though it's called Jessica's Law, it can take on many names. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sidus Masi, Senator Taitakwi. On the bill, is there any other senators? Senator St. Nicholas, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, like one of my other colleague, Senator Joanne, I prefer execution myself. When I first introduced the caning bill, I had this very sentiments in mind about sexual predators and stuff, and people thought that I was joking. I actually wasn't joking, but this bill is a good compromise, and I take a win any way I can get one. My notion has always been, just add more time, and they're laughing at us because that's all we're giving them is time, and that's all they have is time. But this adds teeth to that, to punishment, and I support the measure. I think I was sitting in a public hearing and they said Guam ranks like the second in highest amounts of rapes in the nation. And then I went up and I looked at who was the first, and I think it was Alaska. But it's just very disheartening what is going on in this regard, especially here on our island. You know, it's just one is too many. One of the hardest, I have so many careers in my lifetime, I could have 5 lifetimes. As a school counselor, one of the most hardest thing to do is actually to take in a report, an intake on a child who has gone through sexual abuse. It's you know, it's very difficult. And as a school counselor, as a mental health professional in that regard, you know, we understand the effects, how this affects the child, you know, and I see trends and how these children perform after they have gone through this, and you can actually tell, you know, if someone has gone through something as horrible as sexual abuse. And so that's one of the hardest things to do, is to listen to a child. And like I said, I'll take a win any way I can. And if it is, one more thing, you know, while we were doing the caning, and I also looked up capital punishment for rapes and stuff, and I think the highest law, the court of the land, had, I guess, decided that capital punishment for criminal sexual conduct doesn't rise to a capital offense. And so, you know, we, I guess, giving time to, more time to these types of offenses, you know, I guess it's, you take it any way you can. This is a win for us, and for those who seek justice, who have been wrong in such a manner. And so I applaud the author and his good work, and I ask the rest of the colleagues for their support for this measure. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Senator Lujan, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the second co-author for Bill 183-37, as a previous speaker, Senator Tello, had mentioned that Jessica's law, his name could be anyone. You know, as a father of Jessica Michelle and Jezreel Sky, this is very close to my heart. And when the author had asked me to co-sponsor that in this bill, and knowing that it was patterned after Jessica's law, I said, absolutely, absolutely. You know, all too often, and it's, again, too often, what a terrible word, right? And what a terrible thing to read. But almost on a weekly basis, if not, gosh, almost on a daily basis, we read about the sexual molestation of our young children. And again, what are we doing about it? There are folks that might say, well, you know, this is harsh penalty. Well, I tell you, the victims carry this for life. This is something, as was previously mentioned, even if they've gone through treatment, some may be able to recover and move on, but the scar stays for life. Others never recover and carry this with them for the rest of their lives. This bill sends a very, very strong message that our community, we are sick and tired of the sickos that walk amongst us, that prey on our innocent victims. And again, as I said, as a father of Jessica and Jezri, but they're not just little girls that are victims. Little boys are victims. You know, and I often wonder, because not too long ago we read about an incident that happened a few years back, and the individual had returned to Guam. And I'm saying, and I'm reading this, and I'm going, I have two different sets of rules and laws. And I asked why. One is protected under the cloth, and others are not. But the violation is still the same. The devastation to those kids are the same. But the punishment is not. I urge my colleagues, again, to support this bill. We are sick and tired, and I hope that the passage of this bill, that not just the message, but the sickos out there know that you will get caught, and these actions will not be tolerated. And we hope that this bill, again, will allow our publications to be free of stories, horror stories of our young kids being violated and victims of these sick acts. Again, as was previously mentioned, even the punishment stated in this bill, and I ask myself as a father, and when I read news stories about individuals or victims, young kids, I put myself in the place of those dads, and I go, what would I do? What are they going through now? What are they feeling? What do they want to do at this point? And I just can't fathom what I would do if this were any of my kids that were violated. Because I think if that were the case, I probably wouldn't be standing here. With that said, Madam Speaker, again, I ask, I don't see how this will not be supported by all 15 of our colleagues. Again, this is a message by this House that you sickos out there, we're on to you. And we're tired of it. And we're not going to tolerate this anymore. Not going to tolerate you victimizing our most vulnerable in the community. That being said, Madam Speaker, thank you, and I again stand in full support of Bill 183-37 COR. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Lujan. On the bill, Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question, and I have an amendment I'm preparing already now, but I'll just pose this to my colleague, the author of the bill. I'm in full support of the bill, but I wanted to add a little bit more to it. On page 3, line 14 and 15, and also on page 4, lines 6, or 5 and 6, and even 7. What kind of bothers me is that, as everybody speaks about their children, I have children too. I have grandkids. I don't know how many here has got grandkids. I got grandkids that are at this age, and I'm concerned. I got granddaughters, I got grandsons, and also a great-granddaughter. And this concerns me, but what my concern is that on page 3, and the verbiage is the same on page 4, line 14, it mentions, any such sentence shall include a special parole term of not less than 3 years. I don't agree with any parole, period. If you're going to serve time, 25 years for this crime, you serve your 25 years. In addition to that, and I mentioned one of my colleagues brought up the issue of monitoring. I'm trying to find it in the bill, the monitoring. And I'm concerned that, I don't know, maybe it's somewhere in the code that requires monitoring. I'd like to maybe add that there, that we strike out the any such sentence. That's on page 3 on line 14, or actually starts on line 13. Any such sentence shall include a special parole. I'd like to strike that. No, you don't get no special parole. You don't even get that option. And that there be a mandatory monitoring for life. For life of the defendant or the person found guilty. And that be changed on both line 13, 14, 15, on page 3, and also on page 4. And if that's possible, just give me a few more minutes. They're finishing up the amendment, unless there's an objection by the author. But I'm in full support of the bill. But I just want to add more teeth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All right, we'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator San Augustine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After speaking to other colleagues and staff, the amendment will read, it will leave the word any such sentence shall include a special parole, but it will strike out the 3 years to life. You're on parole for life, with mandatory lifetime monitoring by the parole office. And that'll be the same verbiage on both line 13 to 15 on page 3, and on page 4, line 5 to 7. And co-sponsor is Senator Tello Taiwi.
All right, Senator, just technically on the amendment, I think the word life should not be underlined. It's already in the bill. So, but on this amendment,
okay, if we allow legal to make the
yes.
administrative corrections.
All right, so is there any objection to taking the amendments as one? Okay, no objection. So we will proceed with these two amendments as one amendment. On the amendment, anyone like to speak? Senator Taitukwi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand in, of course, full support. As I mentioned in my opening discussing the legislation, about 30 others, bless you, about 30 other states have implemented the Jessica Act, and incorporating with them was the 25 minimum sentencing. But it also incorporated the lifetime monitoring of the parole law, by the parole office. So I appreciate the author of this amendment, including me as a co-sponsor for this. I think it's just as important to monitor them from life, because many times you've seen individuals who've been sentenced 20 years, 15 years, in the same situation as the Mofness individual who raped after he was convicted, sent away, 15 years, I think it was about 15 years, comes out and does it again. Something's not right. There are wires crossed with individuals that do something so heinous as going after children. So I thank them, the author of the amendment, incorporating this, because I think we should have our due diligence and maintain this for the rest of their life. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Jesus Masi, Senator Taitukwi. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Barnett, on the amendment, you're recognized.
Mic test. Yeah.
Audio, could you please check our mics? We'll take a 1-minute recess. Okay, please try again, Senator.
Okay. Oh, let's see. Yeah. Check. Oh, yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just had a point of clarification, and then I would like to also speak on the amendment. So what the bill does is the bill raises the minimum sentencing for criminal sexual conduct victims under 12, and it raises it to a minimum of 25 years imprisonment to life. And so judges in these cases can give the minimum, which is 25 years. They could give the maximum, which is life, or they could give anywhere in between. But there's no parole for the sentence. So if the judge gives the minimum of 25, these evil individuals will serve every single day of that sentence. If the judge decides to give 40 years, then these evil individuals will serve every single day of that 40 years. If the judge decides to give life in prison, and I hope they do, then these evil individuals will serve every single day of that sentence in prison. And the bill also already allows for a special parole monitoring of not less than 3 years and no more than life. But I got to say, this is a very strong statement that we're sending with this amendment, and I think that this type of monitoring is only in place in a couple of states. But, you know, I do support it. I support locking up these evil people for as long as we can so that we can keep the kids safe. And because of the recidivism, I think it is important that we continue to monitor them in a way that I hope is meaningful, in a way that works, so that if they violate these conditions of parole, they're going back into jail. So, yeah, I rise in support of the amendment, Madam Speaker. Si Diyos Masi.
Si Diyos Masi. Senator Barnett. On the amendment, is there anyone else on the amendment? If not, then the sponsor may close on the amendment. He's waiving closing. So on the amendment by the Senator San Agustin and Senator Taitukwi, is there any objection on the amendment? Seeing no objection, the amendment passes. Anyone else on the bill?
On the main motion, Madam Speaker, Senator Tulay.
Si Diyos Masi. I rise in support of the bill, and I just wanted to add a few things to the discussion, which I believe is a very good discussion this morning. It's a difficult subject to talk about because it really exposes us. We have to come to grips with the reality on Guam and how vulnerable our children are here, and that all that needs to be done to make them better in addition to this bill, to keep them protected. The incidence of rape of children on Guam, as we heard through the statistics from the Healing Hearts Crisis Center, are really terrible. There's no other word for it in there. I think heard one of my colleagues said horrific. And the horror doesn't end with this bill, unfortunately, although this bill will add another tool to the toolbox of the judiciary. In my first term as a senator, we tried to broach this topic, and we did, in regards to criminal sexual conduct, particularly of minors, and domestic violence or family violence, because, as one of my colleagues pointed out, there was a specific case during that term where the person had been released from prison and recommitted a crime. And criminal sexual conduct offenses on Guam, we've had, because of the bill that we passed back then, we passed into law, we required that the court do a new type of assessment for criminal sexual conduct in particular, because we did not believe that the assessments that they were doing were suitable for criminal sexual conduct offenses. It's a whole other kind of offense, and in many cases not curable, but very clearly on Guam at the time, and there was testimony that there was absolutely no way to rehabilitate them in prison or out of prison. So at that time, we required that a new assessment be done before they were released pre-trial, and that the courts be informed by this new assessment before they sentence these people, and particularly to put them on parole, that the parole board also be given this tool, this new assessment, so that before they put anyone on parole, they know whether they are likely to recommit or not. The risk, according to all testimony, is that they are likely to recommit. Criminal sexual conduct perpetrators are likely to recommit this crime. And that's why we have to do special things here where we have nothing to combat that. And so at the time, we also added electronic monitoring, which was relatively new at the time, to the list of tools that the court could use for criminal sexual conduct pretrial release and for domestic violence release, so that we could track them. And I want to say there has been many strides made with electronic monitoring according to the courts, and now they are implemented in many cases. And we are able to put parameters on where people can go by places and particular situations. Of course, it's dependent on the internet or the phone lines, and this is really where the restrictions come in, or our limitations. We did an oversight after that law was passed, however, and we found that the new assessment that was required by law had not been implemented at all. And that was the case several years after the law had been implemented. I'm afraid that that is still the case, that there is no assessment that they are using for criminal sexual conduct. I'm not sure, but at least several years ago, that was still the case. The sad part about the studies is that they also very clearly show that increasing the penalties for criminal sexual conduct will not deter criminal sexual conduct, because they are not afraid of anything. It is like an addiction where it's compelling and unable to stop. There's another psychology to it, not the threat of punishment, that guides these people. And that is another reality that we have to face. That in addition to this bill, because of that, because it will not deter them, it may put them away, but it will not deter new crime. We have to also continue to increase our efforts to protect our vulnerable children. We have to solve homelessness. We have to. One of the cases that really struck me when I was a new senator was a homeless child being raped by a man who was drunk, very clear, near to the homeless shelter, because there was no room in that shelter. And I will never forget that case. Because everybody knows where the homeless are living, and we have things in place supposedly to take these children and put them where they can be safer. It's not ideal, but it's safer. It protects them from rape if we can move them. We need CPS workers to do that. We need to improve our CPS system. We need to help them, as they have asked, by adding CPS workers. We need DOA to process the hiring of CPS workers. We need the entire government to prioritize the hiring of CPS workers. We need to hire and contract for shelter management so that the CPS workers can get back to their regular work of finding families for these children who have to be removed from dangerous homes and dangerous situations. Those can be done. Those are some of the things we can do when we cannot change people's behavior or deter them. We can take the children and make them in a safer place. We have to focus on electronic monitoring on these types of cases. These cases where we already know from the studies performed that they are very likely to reoccur. The public defender in their testimony pointed out that Guam had already tried this. We have laws, 9 GCA 80.37.3A and C currently provide sentencing enhancement of 5 to 25 years of incarceration for any case involving vulnerable victims which are defined as minors who are minors under 13, and other people. The minimum punishment, 20 years of incarceration and a maximum of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years if committed against a vulnerable victim. This is what the courts have available to them right now. But I support this bill to add additional tools for them. Guam Behavioral Health, particularly the Healing Hearts Rape Crisis Center, supports this bill. The Attorney General supports this bill, and that's why this bill was reported out of committee. And I hope that this will save some of these children, some women, from this horrific crime. At least it will put those people behind bars for a longer term and prevent them. Well, we have no other way to prevent them. This will prevent them. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Burnett would like to close.
And I thank the retiring speaker and all my colleagues for their eloquent discussion on this bill. Also like to thank the sponsors of the amendment that I think really puts an added layer of teeth, if you will, to this measure. And the retiring speaker is correct. If there was a way that we could protect our kids before they were victimized, before they were selected by these evil people, then I'm sure every member in this body would do that. Talk to your kids. You know, be close to your kids. Be so close to your kids that you notice when something's off. You notice when something's wrong. And so many of our kids don't have anyone that they could be close to. Because we're now looking at a time that our foster care system, CPS, absolutely overwhelmed. And when you talk to the guardians, the people who work in the system, they all point to crystal methamphetamine, the scourge that continues to plague our island. We have, I don't even want to call them parents, really, but we have people out there who are responsible for their kids, who trade their kids for drugs, who don't protect their kids. And that's the reality. When you talk to these workers in the system, when you talk to the families of people who are related to people addicted to crystal methamphetamine, who see these life choices that the parents and the family members make that all too many times impact the lives of these kids. The public defender's testimony on the bill talked a little bit about the judge's discretion and how the judges usually hand out very harsh sentences for these kinds of crimes. But it was a judge's discretion that led to the release of Paul Mofness, sentenced to life, but allowed to be paroled after 15 years. Set free. Immediately took another victim. And he told the judge it was an addiction. So all my colleagues who spoke in support of this measure and talked about the need to keep these evil people locked up as long as we can, I agree, the judges should use their discretion. The minimum for first-degree criminal sexual conduct perpetrated on a victim younger than 12 years old, this bill passes. The floor is 25 years, no parole. But I pray the judges use their discretion, and I pray that they give these evil people life in prison and let them serve every single day of that sentence. So the ability for the judges to use their discretion is preserved in this bill. All we did was make the minimum penalty that much more severe, and we eliminate the possibility of parole, because as we've seen in previous cases, what good is a life sentence if you're allowed to go free after 15 years? So I pray for this bill's swift passage. I pray that the Office of the Governor fixes it, or the Governor puts her signature on it and allows this measure to become law, so that we as a body and as elected leaders can do one more thing to keep our kids safe. Si Dios masi.
Senator Barnett would like to move the bill to third reading.
Thank you. I'd like to move the bill to the voting file. Third reading. Thank you.
Are there any objection to move to the voting file? There being none, so ordered. We'll now proceed to Bill 227-37 COR. Senator Joanne Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to move Bill 227-37 COR to third reading, and I'd just like to make a brief comment on the bill.
There being no objection, so be it.
As you know, Mr. Speaker, in your committee, you had included in a previous budget bill very similar language on this bill that I introduced, that I'm bringing forth again today at the request of the public auditor, essentially to allow the language that would provide the public auditor 1% of the government of Guam's annual budget to codify it in law, so that this language that we are putting in place now would be a permanent part of the government record, and that every year moving forward, the Office of the Public Auditor will receive the necessary funds that they need to essentially be independent, not just in word, but actually with regards to their funding, and do the work that they need to do to ensure that the government's money, the people's money, is being properly spent and being used for its intended purpose. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I ask for my colleagues' support on Bill 227 so that we can formalize and put in statute this language that provides this pure independence to the public auditor. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak on the bill? Senator Tello.
Si Dios masi, Mr. Speaker. Okay. Of course, as a co-sponsor, I stand in full support of this legislation. And also as the Vice Chair of Appropriations, I think it's appropriate that we do this. It's important to keep tabs on our agencies. And it's important that we provide the funding needed for the OPA to do its job. It's even gone beyond just the public auditing, the auditor's report. It's gone beyond just researching information. It's gone to the point where they find issues with certain agencies that are not complying to the law. This is not just about numbers. It's about whether they are procuring, the procurement process is correct. If they cross their T's, they dot their I's. It's about transparency within our government. It's about the people's money being spent as it is intended to be spent. You know, it was mentioned that the current budget, for the OPA is about $2,030,737 to be exact. And the FI budget, about $1.6 million, consisting of the general fund, special fund revenues. So the annual general fund revenue for FY24 is about $812 million. So if you put that all together, without the special funds, the general fund revenues of 1/4 of 1%, you're looking at $2 million. This is pretty much what we are hoping the OPA is being appropriated every year, and it's important that we continue this, but not just, crossing our fingers or saying who's going to be the appropriate chair for for this, for budget, or what's the next legislature going to do? No, it doesn't need that. We need to be consistent. Consistency is so important. And that's what we're doing here. So the next time when we're doing the budget bill, it's already incorporated by the Guam Code Annotated. We don't need to go any further. It's a done deal, and it's worth every penny. If you want to know what's going on in the government of Guam, follow the money. Just follow the money. And that will tell the story. So this is what we're doing. We're ensuring that we give an amount that's the OPA needs in order to do their due diligence, to be transparent. And then we've done our job. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak in support of this measure.
Thank you, Senator. Does any other colleague would like to speak on this bill? Senator Nicholas.
Kalansa mo ganahulo, Mr. Speaker. There's one thing I wanted to say about Senator Joanne Brown, the author of this, is that she's always consistent, and she's showed that, I guess through me sitting here for almost the whole term, is she's consistent about being transparent and consistent about being bringing light to government finances and being very responsible with it. And struggling here to find the words for why I support this, but there's one thing that I do appreciate is consistency, and I wanted to support this because also the OPA is my neighbor in the office, and so I support his efforts to bring transparency and and also for I think this effort shows that we can give him that autonomy and always make sure that the funds are readily available without constant scrutiny by somebody who wants to do something to hide that things. But this ensures that he gets the proper budget that he needs to carry out the work of the people, and also to bring to make sure that funds are properly expended in our government. And so I rise in support of Senator Brown's bill. I support the measure, and I ask my colleagues the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas. Anyone else like to speak on the bill? Madam Speaker, Senator Lai.
Mr. Speaker, I have no objection to this bill, but I just wanted to rise to discuss some of the assumptions or presumptions that it asks us to make. And one of them is that the auditor, our public auditor, our elected public auditor, is not independent if he doesn't have an independent funding source. I disagree with that. I believe our elected public auditor is completely independent in his discretion in doing his job. We've put parameters in place as to who can run for auditor. We elect them, and it's up to them what they're going to do in office. We give them some mandates, yes, by law. Those are what we require them to do: annual financial audits of the government, different audits of different departments. And then they solicit from us some suggestions for audits. But for the most part, it's their discretion. And that's what we're voting for. Whether we can trust these people to use their discretion in the audits that they're going to choose to do and to get those done in a timely way so that they're actually useful for us and that with recommendations that we can implement. And then it's up to us to implement their recommendations. But I just believe for us, as the body that determines the spending of the government of Guam and predicts the revenue, there are other things that we have to consider as well. We have to give them the minimum necessary to do the work that is required by law. And we have to give them, and I believe we have, given them flexibility in hiring, certification pay to attract auditor or certified accountants, and other types of certified pay, and other flexibilities that other agencies do not have. So they're given all of these things. And we have to give them a certain amount of money in order not to prevent them from doing their jobs. But consider today, where we have what looks to us an unusual amount of revenue coming into the government of Guam. It's high. Yet we have needs that are also high, such as sewer. And in order to fund these things, certain times in our lifetimes, that's our discretion as a legislative body. We need to use our discretion to fund certain things at certain times. Now, I'm not advocating that we defund the auditor. I'm just saying I totally trust that the auditor who is elected is going to do their job to the best of their ability. But if we have extra money in our government, I believe we should address some of these lifelong needs that have not been addressed. And if we have lesser money in our government, we take a 2018 downturn again. I do not agree that we should give the auditor less revenue than he needs to do the job that they are currently doing. I feel like we should prioritize the auditor's amounts necessary to expose corruption and not make that contingent like we give him less for any reason. And that's the only reason, only thing I want to say, it's only a caution on this bill. I understand the intent and I fully agree. We want them to receive money, to be able to count on it, to be able to plan their audits. And I just believe we have not impeded that as a legislature. We have funded them to the best of our ability. And we also have lifelong problems on Guam, such as methamphetamine, such as foster homes, such as so many things, sewer, that we need to run across the island in order to build houses. And that if we have extra revenue, I'd like to see it dedicated to that. And again, I totally trust the current auditor and anyone who's going to put themselves up for that election, that they are going to use their discretion to fully choose, again, which audits they're going to do. Throughout the government, they can choose almost anything. Complete discretion. We trust that they're going to expose corruption. We need it to be timely. And I do believe that they can do that. So, Mr. Speaker, and I stand, I'm going to think about this bill. I'm just worried about, as BBMR cautioned as well, about the downturn in our economy. This bill would then downturn the amount of appropriation that we give to the public auditor. Same percentage, but less amount, meaning, in reality, less amount of employees. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does any other colleague like to speak? There being none, Senator Brown would like to close and also make the motion to send it to third reading file.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After the Speaker's comment, I wasn't going to make a comment, but I will. You know, we authorize millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars without reservation. We're going to come here and deal with another bill that's going to spend another $15 million in the next few months that's going to be gone. I think it's important this be addressed because there's so many issues in government, and certainly having been in government after all these years, that we really need the public auditor to look into, particularly the operations of the government itself and the misuse and misspending of money, the people's money. And if we have a downturn in the economy, Mr. Chair, then I guess we do what we can always do. We can change the law and we can increase the amount of money to give to the public auditor. If you recall, many years ago, the public auditor was another office that was under the governor. Governor got to appoint the public auditor. Can you imagine how much auditing that public auditor was doing on that administration? Especially when the desire of this actually came from our current public auditor. And we have comfort with our current public auditor, our former Speaker, Chief Justice, B.J. Cruz, because he's B.J. Cruz. But none of us are always going to be in any position we hold forever. And I hope that the next auditor that comes, when the time does come, is going to be just as responsible in ensuring that our people's money is properly spent. Because unfortunately, I wish that was not the case, but experience tells me otherwise. Sad again, it's our own people. When they get the opportunity, some of them, to do the wrong thing, they do it. Especially if they think they can get away with it. And historically, most of them have. Because we've not had the ability to effectively address that. And every year the public auditor comes up with his findings, and now we need to strengthen the legal side of the government to ensure that these people get prosecuted. Right now it's a joke. Even the current Attorney General would tell us, I don't have enough resources, I don't have enough personnel. And time and the clock ticks and ticks and ticks, and these people walk off scot-free. So I support my bill. I don't have any question about it. That's why I'm wanting to move forward to put it in statute. And if the need arises and the budget goes down, then that future legislature, I hope, will increase the budget to ensure, always ensure that the now what is close to $1 billion of the people's money is properly spent. So I don't have any reservation in my mind. I hope the Speaker doesn't. But even if she does, that's okay. I will continue to advocate, as I have now in my second term back in the legislature, to support this bill and the intent behind it. With that, Mr. Speaker, I have no further comment. Thank you. And I do want to make a motion to, once again, motion this bill 227 into third reading for voting.
I see there's no objection to moving it to third reading file. That being said, bills moved third reading file. We will now recess until 2 o'clock. See you all back at 2 o'clock. Thank you.